Are starting here. Let's see if Restream decides to work today, because it didn't last time. Almost there. Come on. I think it's going to do it. Nice. Cool. Okay. There's Instagram. There's TikTok. Awesome. Well, here we are, folks. Looks like the chat is joining as well, which reminds me I should turn it on. There's the chat. If you're joining in the chat, please say hello. Let me know that it's working. If you haven't been on my live streams before, then well, if you have, you'll know. If you haven't, then a reminder that, like, I would much rather this be focused on, like, chat messages. So if you have questions and stuff you want to go through, like, just ask them in the chat and kind of direct my focus over to that. I joke about this, but it's true. Like, I could be recording a YouTube video instead, so I'd much rather be actually spending the time answering questions for you. Gilbert Matto says, hello, it's working. Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate you being here. So we know Twitter's working. If you're on some other channel, let me know. I do have a topic for today, and usually this is based on newsletter articles, but I did this a little bit different this time because I wanted to write a newsletter article sort of like to kick off the year and be kind of like a goal setting kind of conversation. And I'm like, I don't want to make a live stream about that. Kind of feels weird. So what I had done instead was, for my newsletter, I actually recorded like a 40-minute video about different things that I'm planning for this year, things that I'm hoping to accomplish. And, you know, it's a bit of a one-off for the newsletter, but usually these live streams are focused on a newsletter article as a topic, as the basis, and then, of course, if you have questions, we'll go through them. So it's a little different. This time it is going to be on a topic from Code Commute, which is another YouTube channel I have. If you haven't checked it out yet, I would encourage you to do so. There's a link in the chat. It's just called Code Commute. It's a vlog-style YouTube channel. So my main dev leader channel is very much edited, polished videos. Code Commute is like, I sit in my car and I drive to and from work, and it's a stream of consciousness. So on Code Commute, I get a bunch of questions. So either people will write them in the comments, or they'll find me on social media. So if you're here, it's dev leader, right, or Nick Cosentino. And people will send me stuff and they'll say, hey, can you like answer this for me, like chat through it. So it's actually, I find, like, really good topics for live streams as well. It's just that on Code Commute, I'm not live streaming from the car as I'm driving. I'm just kind of recording myself talk. So on Code Commute, we were talking about projects. And I think this topic actually came from Reddit in particular. And the Reddit topic was about, if I want to build projects, I keep hearing people, this is primarily for more beginner programmers, right? I keep hearing people talking about building projects, but, like, what the heck am I supposed to build? And, like, how is that going to help me get a job? Like, how do recruiters look for this kind of stuff? And I think something that's challenging is that even, like, I have my own perspective on this stuff, and I see other people talking about it too. And I'm like, it's kind of confusing because people are hearing different things. And sometimes what happens, especially with social media or just like information in general, is that you might hear two different things, and it doesn't necessarily mean that one is right and one is wrong. Like, both or all three or all four of those things could be right. And there's different situations or different contexts where maybe one of them is more true for you. So it's kind of weird, right? So an example that I like to think about, because this is very relevant for hobbies of mine, I don't know how many people are, like, interested in going to the gym, right? But something that I remember hearing early on when I was going to the gym is, like, how do you squat properly? And, like, this is a key thing that people have to figure out. And I heard, like, an unlimited number of variations of this in my time going to the gym and training. And what I realized was, like, there's a lot of different perspectives on this, and they're not necessarily wrong just because they're different. But they're focused on different things. So for example, you'll hear some people saying, oh, like you don't want your knees to go over your toes. And it's like, well, what's actually wrong with that? Or you don't want to be bent over too far forward when you squat. And it's like, yeah, but based on your limb length, that actually might be better for you. Like in my case, that's how I squat. So you'll hear people saying these different things. And then the more you dig into it and the more you understand what's going on, you're like, oh, there's actually different mechanics at play here. So for example, the way you might squat as a bodybuilder is different than as you would squat as a power lifter, which is different than as you would squat as an Olympic lifter. Like, they're just different goals. It's still a squat. So, hey, Brax the Saint, good to see you as well. Thanks for being here. So the reason I bring this up is just something that's completely outside of software engineering to make you realize, like, this isn't like, it's not unique to software engineering, but it is something that comes up. And I think that parallels like that can help when we kind of think about this stuff. But the point being that when you have information that seems like it's at odds with other things, it does not automatically mean that you have to sit there and go, okay, only one of these things can possibly be right. How do I find the imposter, right? It's not necessarily like that. So when we talk about projects that people should focus on as beginners, right? They're trying to get, they're going for job applications. They're trying to get recognized by recruiters. They're trying to, be selected from their interview. They're wondering like, okay, well, what am I supposed to build? And one thing that I hear a lot of, it's actually not, I've made videos on this on Code Commute in particular. One thing I hear people saying a lot is like, you need to go build something, like go build an app and go get users. Build something real and go get users, because that demonstrates that you actually know how to create software and think about users and all these things. And I actually don't agree with this. And I say I don't agree with it, not to say that I think it's bad. It's just not something I agree with. Hello, Amar on TikTok. That's a lot of messages. Hello. Hey, doggy. Hi from Germany. Good to see you in Germany. What time is it in Germany right now? Is it like super early, like ridiculously early or something? I actually don't know. But thank you for being here, because I feel like it's probably not a good time for you. So sorry, you got to stop that on TikTok. That's too much. The TikTok chat is not going through to the main chat, but it's a lot. So please stop. The 4 in the morning. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for being here. I feel like you have probably better things to do, like sleep, but I appreciate that you're here. So thank you. But yeah, I think that one piece of advice I hear a lot of people saying is like, go build projects that will get you users, and that way you're demonstrating that you've built something. And I don't think that it's bad advice, but I think it's the wrong, old Dev always up early. I think that it's the wrong focus for a lot of beginners. Okay, so that's my take on it. And I want to start this off by talking about, I want to give you the opposite. Like, I want to explain, even though it's not my opinion, why I think that could be good advice. So I want to practice here sharing the argument for that, even though it's not what I necessarily agree with. So I think that there's some good stuff that does come from that. So the topic right now is like, as a junior, going to focus on building something like an app or a website and getting real users. I think some of the good things that come from that is that you get to practice actually building things, right? And I think a lot of the time when we think about how juniors are focused on stuff, the challenge is that you'll hear like getting stuck in tutorial hell. Brax is saying, I will come back to that question. That's a good one. So when we think about tutorial hell, this is a situation where people are, they're building things, but like they're not actually things that will keep going. Like, so you practice what's in the tutorial, right? You get some exercise from doing that, but then it's like, okay, it's done. I'm done the tutorial. I almost like look at it like I was going to use like building Lego sets as an example. It's not even a good one though. It's like, it's too contrived, right? It's like you have all the steps carved out for you. You're just kind of repeating what's put in front of you. It's not that that's wrong or it's bad, but when people get stuck in this mode, they often have challenges breaking out of this. So I do. Hi, Malathi from India. That's awesome. What time is it in India right now? It's 4 in the morning in Germany, so that's pretty wild. But I feel like India is probably not a convenient time either. So thank you for being here. I think the good thing that can come from trying to focus on building some software and getting users is that you need to be trying to actually build something. It's not going to be a tutorial that's a one-time video or article you read through and then you're done. You actually have to put in more effort, more thought around, I'm building software, I need to ship it, I need to, and whatever that looks like, maybe that's deploying, maybe that's releasing it to an app store. I have to go through the life cycle of doing this. Okay, now you get people using it. I need to make sure that I'm prioritizing the right thing for users. Like that's actually a really important skill set to have as a software developer, or at least to understand how that works. If you're working at companies, many times there are other roles that help fulfill that. Like product managers or product owners will sort of help figure out what customers are wanting and helping prioritize that. But being able to understand that, like, we don't just, as software developers, we don't just build cool stuff because we think it's cool. We work at a company. It's a business. We have to be building things that are valuable for the users. So I think that can be a very good skill to practice. There's a lot of stuff like being able to work on live software. So if you're running a service and it's not an app, let's say, you have users and the site's live, like how do you make changes and work within those constraints? Like I think that these are really interesting, real software development problems to go solve. Working from home right now and listen to your live. Awesome stuff. Well, thanks for being here, Architect. Yeah, good to see you. I know you're from the Code Commute family, so thanks for being here. Yeah, so I think, like I said, I don't really like this advice, but I think that there's some merit to it. I don't think that it's wrong or it's bad. It's just not what I would recommend for folks. So what do I recommend, right? So if it's not building an app, if it's not building an app to get users, I mean, like, first of all, well, why? And I think what I've talked about before, I think, so Doggy's saying, I think the ability to get deep in details in demand and having some index in your mind is a good strat. Yeah, I think is a good strategy. Yeah. So I think that's helpful. The reason I don't like this advice for beginners is because I think that it's focused on too many things all at once. And the thing that I would often recommend to beginners is like, we have different goals when we're talking about building projects, and I think that sometimes these things get conflated. Okay, so I don't think that it's like these are mutually exclusive, but the two goals I think about, at least when I'm talking to people that are like, hey, what project should I build? The two things I'm thinking through are you trying to learn, and or are you trying to demonstrate like a portfolio type of thing? Because I think that you put a different focus onto each of these. And you might, if you're thinking through this, you might say, hey, Nick, I think of another one. So that maybe there's multiples of this. But I think that for most beginners, there's like a hyper focus on like, well, what should be in my portfolio that I'm demonstrating to people? And then people go, oh, well, if you're going to go build another calculator or to-do app, like no one wants to see that garbage and don't waste your time on that. And I'm like, I mean, maybe not, like maybe that doesn't stand out. That doesn't mean that it's not worth you doing. And it's because the goal is different. If you're interested in trying to learn things, if you're trying to build software, like there's nothing wrong with going to build a calculator app. Like, I'll give you an example. If I had, like, I really want to be able to spend more time and I need to carve out more time for it. I don't have any. If I wanted to go learn Maui, so working in C# instead of Xamarin now, we have Maui. If I wanted to go work and build something in Maui, I've been programming for over 21 years. And if I wanted to go practice that, I would literally go build something like a calculator app in Maui. You know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to go put that in my portfolio and say, look, I made a calculator app. Not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just that I don't think that's really going to stand out. Different goal. I don't need to put that in a portfolio. What I would do is I would go build that so I could go learn. I could go get that experience and get comfortable with the technology. So different goal. I'm going to park that thought for a question for a moment, sorry, and go over to the chat for questions. Oh, are there commercials on YouTube? Sorry. I try to, so the videos get recorded, and then once they're up on YouTube and you're watching the recorded, I set the monetization status after, but I wonder if the setting has persisted. So I do apologize. I don't know if I can go change that in the middle of this right now. So my apologies for that. But I do like, that's the goal, is like once it's recorded, if you miss the live stream, like you can watch the YouTube commercials, and I'll make 2 pennies off of people watching the live stream, because that's the life of a YouTuber. So I apologize for that. Okay, so what is your favorite project you built? Good question. Different things for different reasons, I guess. My favorite one to work on historically is one that I go back to. I haven't in a few years now. I've been building like a 2D role-playing game for like 20 years. And it's never going to be finished. It's like a sandbox to work in. But it's fun for me. I get to try out building like literally anything. So it's like a creative sandbox. So that's one that I really enjoy. I think one of the coolest things I've shared this kind of story before. One of the cool projects that I built professionally was when I was working at Magnet Forensics before Microsoft. It's a digital forensics company, as the name might suggest, and we had this project, or we had this thing that was going to be outsourced, and company that it was outsourced to like wasn't doing such a great job with it, and basically myself and another individual, good friend of mine, colleague at the company, we took it upon ourselves to say we're gonna try building it. And so it was a mobile acquisition product, and the reason, like, it just had such a fun journey. Like the first working prototype the first time it ever worked, literally we were on an airplane taking off in the airplane, and we were doing our first collection of bytes off of an Android phone. So like that was just, it was like super cool. It was like we're hacking away at this stuff and we finally get this thing working as the plane's taking off. I was like, it's just neat. But the entire journey with that product was super cool. We got to tackle some really interesting forensic challenges with mobile phones that like there's, at the time, I would argue like one big company that sort of had a monopoly on the space, and we were very much like the underdogs, right? So the team that I managed was only a few people, and this other company had like, tons of resources, and we were like, we're gonna build something better. And in my opinion, it was better. Like we had way fewer resources, but I feel like we were building software that was easier to use, had advanced functionality. They probably had more features in general, just because when you're around for that long with so many resources, you can do the busy work, you can put in the little features here and there. But in terms of like being able to add value, I think that we were absolutely crushing it. So that project felt really cool to work on. But that was a product called Magnet Acquire. I think that since I've gone, I don't even know if they offer it anymore. They've like, it's a completely, I'm not saying this in a bad way, like completely different company in terms of portfolio since I've left. Like they've done acquisitions and stuff. So, and sorry, checking out Instagram. So Louise, or I think that's how you pronounce her name. So good. What's the project? So yeah, that was Magnet Acquire. You're welcome for the content. You're asking about the resources. Which resources are you asking about? And if you're more specific, I can try to give you a link to what you're after there. Brax the Saint, you got more questions. Another question, and don't worry, like that's the whole chat is like ask. The whole point of the live stream is to ask questions, right? I will spend the entire time answering questions. Happy to do it. My whole career from being a junior and coming from a boot camp, I've spent a lot of time working strictly on frameworks. Recently, I've spent more time actually understanding a language. Do you think a lot of devs are too reliant on frameworks and are leaving behind the foundational stuff? Yes and no. I have different thoughts on this, I guess. I don't necessarily want to like change this into like an AI question, but I think this is kind of relevant in terms of like when I talk about AI stuff. I think my answer to this on the surface is probably yes. I think that people are perhaps too reliant on these things, but I want to start challenging my perspective on this a little bit more. The reason I say that is like, if I think about how some people were trying to teach me about software development when I started, it's definitely not the advice I would give people today after going through things. Not because I think that it's wrong, I just don't think that it's as relevant or as important to focus on. And to give you a super, super brief example, a friend of mine, he is self-proclaimed like not a programmer. He would never tell you that he is, but like he's been using AI a ton and literally putting software solutions together. He had a 5-digit contract, building software. Like he's doing very well putting things together. And like how he is learning to go through things is wildly different than what I did, and still wildly different than what I would probably even encourage people today. But the point is, it's working very well for him. What I don't know, and this is where people will say, well, that sounds dangerous. Like you can't do that. You can't just trust AI or whatever. Like you need, back to the question, right? Like you need the fundamentals. I'm like, I get it. Like, don't get me wrong. I get it because that's also my stance. But now I'm trying to sit here and challenge myself and be like, do you? Like, genuinely, it sounds kind of scary, but like, do you? I don't know. We seem to always have. And I think that we're very comfortable saying, well, obviously, yes, you must. But do you? I don't know. So the question, right, like, are we missing out on some of the foundational stuff? Perhaps. And like maybe statistically the answer, and I don't have the data, but maybe statistically the answer is yes, we are missing out on the foundational stuff. But then this other question is like, how much does that matter? Like I actually don't know. So yeah, like I said, I'm trying to challenge my perspective on that a little bit more because I'm very curious. I have the same type of question, right? I want to see how that's going to pan out for people. I think it's very easy for me to sit here and say, yeah, the wave of developers we have coming through, everyone's using AI, everyone's just got, all the frameworks are built. You don't have to think that hard to go build stuff. And back in my day, and then I start to go, that sounds scary. Like, why do I have that perspective, right? I think it's just easy to fall into that. So like I said, I'm trying to challenge myself on how I think about that. So Brax is saying, I don't know if that's a good answer, but I think that's kind of where I stand. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know what you think. Gilbert, I built an app with C# and WinForms. Hell yeah. That's a sweet combo. I spent a lot of my career doing that, which can be bought. Nice. And is being used at a company. Yeah, that helps. Absolutely. So it's a great point, right? It's not that this is wrong. And I kind of derailed myself because I wanted to go answer questions in the chat. Quickly jumping back to this topic, it's certainly not wrong. And I think that there is a certain set of individuals that it's a good fit for. I think the average person that I talk to that's going through this is likely not going to be someone that is going to be either a consultant or not going to be like a solopreneur. They're not going to be operating like that. Statistically, most people I talk to will probably try to get hired on to companies and be employees. And again, it's not that those other skills are bad, but the other skills in order to be selling things and running a product, like to be selling a product or running a service, there's a lot of other skills that have very little to do with like writing software. And again, it's not bad if you have those skills. It's great. It's a nice bonus to have those things. But I think that if someone is time constrained and they're like, look, I just want to be able to build software better, like what should I focus on? I would say if you were trying to spend more time selling things, it's probably, and that's compromising your time, probably not a good use of your time. Right? So I have on the side, I have a business called Brand Ghost. And Brand Ghost is a SaaS platform that I'm building to allow people to share social media content. It will cross-post to different platforms. That's all for free, by the way. So shameless plug, if you're interested in like starting to get going on social media, you can check out brandghost.ai. I will just literally plug that in the chat right now so you have it if you're interested, but it's free to use, okay? So we have more advanced paid for features for sure, but like as someone who's been programming for a pretty long while, the amount of time and effort that it takes me to try and sell is ridiculous. It's uncomfortable for me. It's not a good, like, it's not a skill set I have. I really have to work at it. And I'm trying to do a better job of saying, like, I'm not trying to say I'm bad at it. I'm not skilled at it. I have to practice it. It's uncomfortable. It's a low skill thing I have, but I have to do it. Now, that means if I'm spending time trying to get good at selling, that is less time that I am building software. Fortunately, at this point in my career, I have spent a long time building software. If I miss out on some practice, that's okay. It's probably really helpful that I am working on selling things because I suck at that for now. So when I talk to more beginner programmers, I try to remind people that I don't think it's bad advice that you want to go build something and try to get users, but I think it will genuinely be a distraction. So that's my kind of take on that, to go back to Gilbert's point. So thanks for sharing that, though. I think it's cool that if you've been able to build something and people are paying for it, that's awesome. Brax is saying that's awesome. Being able to create a project equivalent to what a giant is working on with a similar team or with a smaller team, it felt cool. It was like, and I think I can say this confidently that like everyone on the team felt that way. So when it felt like there were insurmountable challenges, we were like, screw that. Like, you know, we feel like we can accomplish anything. And like that kind of feeling on a team is like super cool because you're surrounded by people where you're like, okay, like what's going to get tossed at us today? And there were some things that we worked on because it was digital forensics. It was pretty groundbreaking stuff a lot of the time for getting data off of phones. And we'd be like, oh, there's this phone that has whatever situation going on for it, like this model of phone, whatever. And we're like, there's nothing that supports access to this. And we're like, well, for now, like we got to find a way, right? So it was such a cool mentality to, instead of, and I wrote an article about this, instead of looking at things like the phrase was like technically infeasible, instead of looking at things that are challenging going, oh, that's technically infeasible, we can't do it, it can't be done, it's an insurmountable challenge, we always just flip things around and we're like, yeah, it's going to be hard, but like we're going to get it. And we would work at things and we would. So it was, again, it was a really cool experience to be able to go through that. So that project was not only like one of my favorites because of the technology and like how it came to be, but honestly, like the team that was surrounding it, it kind of sucks to say, but like, I don't know if I will ever feel that way about like, you know, operating on a team again. I can say that like, I don't want people to misinterpret that like I don't like the teams I have at Microsoft or anything like that, but different dynamics going on. So yeah, it's really, really hard to beat that feeling. Doggy's saying, I used to work on freelance base, now going for your own SaaS. Awesome. You learn a lot by doing so. Got a home lab up and running. Nice. Terraform, OpenStack, Kubernetes, Next.js, Blazor. Learn a lot. Absolutely. Right. A lot of the stuff, like if I wasn't building Brand Ghost, I would still build stuff on the side just to be learning. A good example I don't know if it's a good example, interesting example. I haven't shared this publicly because I always forget about it. But at the beginning of the pandemic, when everything was going into lockdown, I have a good friend of mine. We said, we're going to build an app. And we said, we're going to build Tinder. Hear me out. We're going to build Tinder, but for going out to eat. So the idea, it was called Hangry, a genius name, right? Called Hangry. And the way that it would work is that if you can imagine, you've probably been in this situation either with your partner or even with people like at work. If you're like, oh, time to go for lunch, where are we going to eat today? Or let's go out for dinner. What do you want to eat for dinner? The way that it would work is that you would open up Hangry, and then you and your partner or you and your teammates, whatever, you would swipe on food, like places you want to eat, just like Tinder. And what would happen is as soon as there was either a match that everyone agreed on, so no one wanted to say it, but everyone wanted to go eat Chinese food, cool. Like, boom, you got the match? Great. You know exactly where you're going. No one had to be confrontational or make the executive decision. And at the end of swiping, if there wasn't like a unanimous agreement, it would pick the highest voted on thing or just pick something random. But the point is that it took away this feeling of like, oh, someone's got to make the decision. I don't want to be the one. When you have too many indecisive people, you're just going to starve, right? So when we went to go build that, I just said, I'm going to pick C# because I know C#. But basically every other piece of technology that we used, I was like, I don't know this, but I'm going to learn it. So I think I was using like Firebase. I think I was using MongoDB. I hadn't used much MongoDB at all. That was built in Xamarin. So I think I had a little bit of Xamarin experience from way before. Was there something before Xamarin? I can't remember. But anyway, the whole thing felt like new. It was in AWS. I think there were some things in AWS that I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. So a lot of cool stuff. Don't regret it. But like, that was just a hobby project. It flopped for sure. Like, we didn't, no paying users or anything like that. But like, it was fun to go build. By building stuff, you'll learn a lot. Dog is saying curiosity is always required. It makes you spend more time with dev topics, which makes you get better fast. Intrinsic motivation. I spent in front of the computer. Never seen a top dev without it. Yeah, so it's interesting. Like, I agree with what's being said here. I also have not seen that. I would also say I don't think that it is a rule. It's just not something I've observed. So I do agree with Doggy. Jonathan Barron, hi. I just know HTML and CSS right now, self-taught. Can work experience on a resume include a project I will do for a local business? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, why not? So this is the thing too. So Jonathan, I think I've heard people give this advice on LinkedIn especially. And it's kind of interesting, right? I think I don't want to sound like I'm criticizing this advice because I think that you're doing the right stuff. The advice that I have heard given is like, people will say, hey, look, I don't have work experience to put on a resume, right? So can't list it because you haven't worked somewhere yet that's doing software. Okay. So the advice is, hey, if you file an LLC, now you have a business name and now you go build a project under it, you could now say, hey, look, it's work experience under this. What Jonathan's doing here is a little bit different because he actually has someone, it's a local business that is going to pay for it. So legitimately, this is a business. That's great. Awesome work. The reason I don't love that advice is because I feel like it's like a box checking exercise and kind of motivated by the wrong things. So I'm not here to say it's bad advice. If people have done it and it's worked well for them, I think that's great. The reason I don't love it is because if you were to just create the LLC, so you have a business name and you're like, technically it's a business, and then you try building some stuff, but you're not actually, you don't have users, you're not like, you're just kind of building side projects for fun. The reason I wouldn't want to count that as like, as work experience is because, yeah, like Gilbert said it exactly. That advice sounds a bit loopholey. I don't know a better way to say it. I don't love it. I think it ends up making the motivation not the thing that I would recommend. And it's because it sounds loopholey. It's because you're going, and don't get me wrong, I understand why. You want to be able to list work experience, but then this is kind of what I would say. So imagine that helps, because there's different phases of job applications and interviews and all of that. Imagine that helps get past the recruiter and they're like, hey, like this person's got work experience. Cool. Like next step. Could you like just hear me out for a sec? Could you imagine being in the interview and someone's like, awesome. So tell me about this work experience you had at Nick's Cool Co. LLC. And you're like, oh yeah, for sure. So I built a weather app in ASP.NET Core, and they're going, oh, okay. And like, you know, what were you helping your users with? And you're kind of like, well, and then you're kind of in this weird spot where you're like, pardon my language, like, holy shit, like, what do I say? Because I actually haven't worked somewhere. So I think that it's a little bit misleading. So in Jonathan's case, I don't think that that's wrong. I actually think that that's great because he is getting paid to do this. But I think what people might be misunderstanding is that they're saying, I don't have work experience, therefore I will not be considered. Yes, it might be helpful to have work experience compared to someone that does not. But I think what a lot of people are missing, it's kind of funny, I'm going to say it. If you think about the number of people applying to jobs, okay? Right now, there's a number of people that are watching this stream that I can see. Okay, so unless this is just pure entertainment, you're like, look at this bald guy with a white in his beard and like he talks funny because he's Canadian. If you're here for reasons other than, you know, entertainment, I guess, I would wager you're probably doing more than the average person that is a developer trying to break into the industry. Because I bet you the average developer trying to break into the industry does not even watch or read material that's extracurricular. I bet you they're not building projects on the side. They're like, I did my boot camp or I did my college or university and I'm going to start applying. I checked the boxes. I'm going to start applying. So I think that it's actually very misleading because there's a lot of people that are online trying to say, like, how do I better myself? How do I get ahead? And the reality is you probably actually are already ahead, which is great. I'm not saying give up on that. I'm just saying that I think it's a little bit skewed and people don't realize that. So when people are like, I don't have the prior work experience, I don't think that that's the end of the world. And I think personally, I think that when you're trying to use the LLC thing as like a, hey, look, I got the work experience. I'm like, you know what? I would actually I would rather happen. And this is just my personal opinion, is like, whatever you were going to work on in your LLC and, you know, dish out some money to go register it. Like, why don't you just go build that? And why don't you go make that your goal to go learn something? Because this comes back to my earlier point, was I see generally two goals for this stuff. One is showcasing. And when we talk about showcasing, I think people misunderstand this too. It's showcasing impact. Okay, so impact versus learning. And if you are a junior, I know people don't believe this because they're like, oh, there's no junior jobs. Like no one's high, like the bar is set too high. I've literally hired juniors this year, not to my own team because I don't have, actually, no, I didn't do the interviews, but I brought on people to my team that were junior after going through the results of the interviews. And then I interviewed people not for my team that were junior. And you don't necessarily need to have the work experience. It's a bit of a misconception. I know that everyone's hyper focused on how competitive things are, and I'm not trying to minimize that. But my point is that if you are building stuff, you can absolutely go build projects and add that onto your resume as projects you worked on and talk about the stuff you were learning. Right? When you're building things and you're actually working through like code and building stuff, there's going to be things that you're going to learn about. And I think that can be an awesome opportunity to put on a resume. When I talk about this stuff, I mentioned earlier, I see different phases to getting through and getting a job. That first part is that visibility part. I will say that it can be challenging to stand out in those cases. I don't have data to back this up, so like, do your own homework on this kind of stuff. If we together think about this and we say, okay, let's pick a company, doesn't have to be Microsoft. Let's pick a company they put up a job posting for a role and it's remote. So that means people from different parts of the world can apply. Now, the pool of potential developers that can apply for this role is not restricted to a geography like a city or people that are willing to relocate to that city. It's global. So you open that role up, 1,000, 2,000, however many thousand developers apply for that position. I mean this seriously. Do we think that a human is going to sit there and go through every single job application and try to, and it's a real thought exercise I want you to do. Do we think that one human is going to sit there, go through every job application and then try to order them in a way where they're like, this is the best application down to this is the worst one? It's not happening. It's just, it's not going to work that way. It's not scalable. I'm not saying that's good or bad practice. I'm just saying that that's just not realistic. I legitimately, I don't even know how Microsoft does it. I don't know how any big tech company actually does it in practice because it's not scalable. So I suspect, again, I don't know this for a fact, I suspect, and I must assume this, that there needs to be some amount of automation that will try filtering some of these things out. I don't see another way that humans could do this in a scalable way. Maybe it's smaller companies because the volume of applications is smaller, but you could also say maybe it's smaller companies, they don't even have as many resources to be going through resumes. So maybe they do have to go look for something that's going to help filter these things out. My point is that when we're thinking about having our job applications and resumes stand out, you may employ different tactics for that. So maybe adding in some keywords for the technologies you're using can be helpful, right? If you imagine a resume where you completely omitted them, if there any company that's going to use any type of filtering will just automatically exclude you. So I'm not here to say good or bad practice. All that I'm saying is like, if you don't want that to be a factor that's going to completely remove you, I would probably find a way to include some keywords. That would be advice in general that I give to people. But for that part alone, does it matter if it's work experience or a project that you worked on? I don't know. Like, probably not. Unless they have such good filtering that it's like, only look for this keyword when it says work experience, like at a company for this many years. Like, I don't think that's happening. So maybe at the human level, maybe they're going, oh, this person only has 2 years of MySQL, so no, perhaps. But I would even say that I've told people stats like this before for software engineers that have joined my teams at Microsoft, either right before me or right after. I think, so I'm trying to say like people that aren't tenured employees at Microsoft where I joined the teams, so newer people. I think I've had 1 or 2 people that have known C#, like fluently. And the rest, no C#. Guess what language we use? C#. So even these individuals were hired on without having that technology, that language background. So the reason I'm telling you this is because I think a lot of the time there's so much focus on like how to hyper optimize this stuff that like you get like analysis paralysis. The example I gave right at the beginning of the stream, probably before most people were on here, I was talking about like going to the gym and squatting. When you start trying to research how to do this more effectively, what ends up happening is you go, there are 10 different ways that I've heard people say how to do this. Every one of them is different. How the hell am I supposed to practice any of this? If I do thing A, that's completely at odds with person C, what they're saying. So Do I just disregard both of those now and then I go to person B and see what they're saying? The reality is there's little truths to all these things. And the context will make a difference. So you might have someone say, hey, don't include all those keywords. That's just noise. It's going to make your resume hard to read. And I might say, yeah, like I could agree with that. But at the same time, like I think if you don't put keywords in, it's going to miss out on some of the filtering opportunities that are automatic. So my goal when I'm talking to people about this stuff or things in general is like, I don't want to tell you one way is completely right or one way is completely wrong. I want to give you different perspective on these things, and then you can make an informed decision for yourself. I think that's the best I can do at the end of the day. So let's go back to the chat. Brax is saying, definitely a fair answer. Buddy of mine who has been in the industry 4 times as long as me described the issue. Issues of people who lack fundamentals are a misunderstanding of what goes on under the hood. Therefore, a really obscure bug happens, which it's admittedly rare. We lack the understanding how to solve the issue, as well as younger developers being able to improve on these frameworks going forward. So yeah, so when Brax was talking about this a little bit earlier, you know, I don't disagree with that. I think that's actually a very valid point. And then, okay, so I like doing this thing where it's like, okay, let's take a different perspective on it and see, like, where do we end up, right? So if I agree, if you have some obscure bug that comes up and you're like, okay, no one actually understands how this works, like, good luck. Maybe people, even if they don't understand how those things work, they're still very curious and they're good problem solvers. They might actually be very good at debugging somehow. So it's not impossible, probably unlikely, but they might be very good at debugging even though they don't understand the fundamentals. And what they're able to do is start piecing together things very well and effectively. And then they create this sort of web of information, and then they can navigate and get to the root cause. I think it's still possible. Another thing might be, and this is, I think, where it gets kind of scary, is like, what if they don't need to be? What if they're very good at explaining the symptoms that they're observing? So there's data, and they're like, okay, I have all this data that I can use to explain a particular scenario holistically, and I can do that very effectively. And now I will ask the AI. Is it, and I'm not saying that this is going to work. I know there's people that are going to watch this and be like, oh my God, this guy. I'm just trying to give you different perspectives on this. Is it in the realm of possibility that someone could be so capable of doing that that it actually becomes a non-issue for them? And I think personally, I think the answer is perhaps, which makes me nervous because it's kind of weird. But I like talking about these things from different perspectives because, like I said, I'm trying to challenge my own outlook on them. Doggy's saying, the best interview question, which Raspberry Pi projects have you done? Yeah, so I think it's cool, right? Like, I can say I've built some stuff in Raspberry or on a Raspberry Pi. I think when I talked about when I launched DevLeader back in 2013, and it was just a blog, but I hosted DevLeader on a Raspberry Pi in my condo back in Kitchener-Waterloo. So I would not do that today, just because it's more problems than I'm interested in, but it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. Brax is saying, I have an interview coming up and the company's using their own proprietary front-end library. Is the fundamental question a bad question for me to ask the team their opinion on during the interview? No, I think it's an interesting one, right? I think with interviews, what's a good way to put this? I think you probably want to have a goal with your question, is how I would put that. So, and I don't mean this like in a facetious way, and you don't have to answer it in the chat, but like genuinely, like what is the goal of your question? Like, is it just a curiosity? That's fine. But I think like have a goal with your question, and as long as when you answer that for yourself, you're like, oh, I didn't actually have a goal. If you're thinking like, I don't have a goal and I don't know what the goal is, don't ask it. But if you're like, hey, no, like I would like to know about this. I'd like to understand. I'd like to see how they think. Maybe I am just curious. I think if you're intentional about it, nothing wrong with that. I based on what I kind of hear you saying here, it doesn't sound like you're trying to challenge them on it. So if it's a curiosity thing or for your own understanding, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But genuinely, like, I think ask yourself, what's the goal of your question? And, is there an answer or a response where you may have, a different opinion based on the response from that? Because go through the thought exercise. I think it's interesting. Work experience also shows your ability to work in a company environment. Might show tech skills and dedication, but says nothing about you as a person or a team member. Yeah. So, hobby projects. Doggy, which one? Hobby projects also show your ability to. Might show tech skills. I'm not sure which one you meant for where, because I think you corrected yourself, but I'm not sure which part you're correcting. So, my take on this though is like, we have, like, in interviews, we have behavioral questions where we can go navigate those things in terms of like how you work as a team member, which, by the way, a lot of people don't realize this as software developers because we're so focused on technical things that even in interviews, we kind of mess it up. But when people in interviews are asking you behavioral interview questions, it might sound surprising to you, but their goal with those questions a lot of the time is not to have you explain every nitty-gritty detail about the technicals, because they don't care and it doesn't actually matter. So a lot of the time with these behavioral interview questions, they are trying to see how you work and function in a team. What are you going to be like to work with? And by walking through scenarios from your real experience, that is hopefully one of the best indicators they have. Like, if they can use the past to predict the future, if they walk you through a scenario and you're explaining, like, this is what I am like to work with, then they have a good indicator. But going into like the weeds and saying like, oh, and then I like added this, like this test case and whatever, like, it's too much detail and it doesn't matter. So, to what Doggy was saying, I just wanted to say, like, for behavioral interview questions, we have something like that for in the interview. But when we're talking about on a resume, right, work experience or projects, neither of those alone are sufficient, in my opinion, are sufficient data points when you're just looking at a resume or a job application to call out what someone is like to work with on a team. That was very wordy. Yeah, and then, so there we go. Doggy's kind of saying, I know a genius Linux dev, and this is the most stereotypical thing I've ever heard, but thank you for saying it. I know a genius Linux dev, unable to communicate, and we'll just end the sentence there. Unable to communicate, always upset team and management. Linux dev aside, but this is like, thank you for saying this, because I think that, like, I just need other people to say it more. But we talk as software developers so much about technical details, and technical stuff is important. We are building technical systems. You need technical skills to do so. But the other thing that you're doing for almost all software developers is building software in teams. And even if you're not building software in teams, if you are building software for a customer, you have to communicate. You need to be able to do it effectively. It is absolutely a skill. I feel like a lot of people don't like to admit it, but like, I think what makes it really obvious is when you work with people that really suck at communicating, you go, oh man, like, communication is pretty important. Because when it's impossible to work with someone because they're, and this is like more like soft skills in general, but like when you're unable to collaborate, communicate with people, it's just nonstop friction. So we can avoid that by working on our communication skills. So, yeah, and Brack saying pure curiosity for their interview question. I guess you can understand why they decided to build their own library. Yeah. And I think that you can transform that into, like, the genuine curiosity can be interesting, right? Because you might say, like, hey, I know that there's a ton of like front end frameworks. So like, I am curious, why did you decide to build your own? Like, what things have you learned from doing that? Like, do you, I don't know how you would phrase this. I'm kind of making it up on the spot, but like, I would be curious to see if they, like, I wouldn't want to use the word regret, but like, now that you've done it, like, what are things that you have learned from this? Because I'm assuming they don't regret it if they keep building it, maybe, but like, cool, you did it. So was it a good move? Finding ways to kind of navigate that would be kind of interesting, I think. Sus boy, last time you were on the stream, and I remember because I said your username out loud, and then I felt really weird about it. But Sus boy says, just started my first internship. Congratulations, by the way. Already feeling overwhelmed and not knowing stuff. How long do you think it would take for an intern to get up to speed with understanding a larger code base? A long time. So don't beat yourself up over it. You may leave your internship and not know the whole code base. You might not know a majority of the code base. Do not beat yourself up over it. This is, I don't know for a fact. This is probably something like imposter syndrome, which literally everyone will go through. I want to assume, and I have to make an assumption here because I genuinely don't know you, but I want to imagine that you are a very capable person. The people that hired you for that internship believe so, right? And I'm sure that if you were to think about things that you've accomplished in your software development so far, whether it's, it's your first internship, but you've probably coded some things before, right? So you're probably very capable. Okay, so right, it's a good name, and I say the names out loud, so someone's going to join a stream one day and I'm going to say something and be like, oh my God, okay. Sus boy's not so bad, but still kind of makes me feel awkward to say out loud. Anyway, point is, first step, deep breath. It's okay. A lot of the time this stuff can feel overwhelming, especially because what you start doing is you're comparing yourself to other people and you're like, well, all these people around me seem to be able to navigate this stuff. Yeah, because they've been doing it a lot longer, and that's totally cool. So again, don't worry, that's fine. In terms of how long, it's a very difficult question to answer. There's so many factors, including like your own capabilities, how complex the code base is to begin with, what language it's in, how big the code base is, how well it's maintained. Like there's a million things. Even the scope of work that you're being given. I'll give you a quick example. I worked at a startup once, and it's not that I definitely didn't know the whole code base by any means. And it was a small company. I think it was like 10 people or so. I had to learn, so this is about a language, not even the code base. I had to learn Objective-C at that internship. By the way, I think arguably one of the worst languages ever, but that's just my opinion. And I honestly felt like I was going through that internship and I was like, I'm going to finish this internship and still not understand this language. I was able to make progress on things, but I was like, nothing about this language feels right. And I remember the entire time being like, oh no, oh no, oh no. So, I'm sharing this with you because I don't think, and Doggy's, thank you. Doggy's chiming in here and saying like, you don't like this. The expectations that you're probably setting on yourself are probably different. So I think that a good frame of reference here is like, if you're being assigned tasks, and this is, again, as an intern, this is the same for juniors that are hired onto teams for like, you're brand new working somewhere. There is an expectation that it's going to take you some time to ramp up. That's okay. I'm hoping that on the internship, they're giving you some work that is scoped down to be more digestible for you so that they can start building that momentum for you. Because it's going to take some of that. Getting some smaller things to work on, whether that's small bug fixes, small features, things that other people on the team might go, I know how to go do that. But like, we haven't had time, or I have other priorities for myself right now. And then working on those things as an intern might be a great fit because they're still valuable, but they're a lot smaller in scope and you're able to do them. So hopefully they start building up some momentum like that for you. And I would say a good 2 things, maybe 3. One is that as the internship's going along, you want to get a gut feel for if you feel like this is getting better. Does not mean like, oh, do I know all of the code base? But like, do I feel like I'm getting through my work more effectively? I think that's a good kind of gut check. If they have set you up with like an intern buddy, so maybe another developer on the team that's not just the manager, let's say, Are you having conversations with them and getting some feedback around your progression? And then between them and then your manager, this is the third part, like what are their expectations and are you meeting them? Because I'm assuming, and I'm not your manager, but I'm assuming your manager is probably not like, by the end of this internship, I expect you to know the whole code base. It's probably not. I have code that I've written and I don't know the whole code base anymore. So I know that's maybe not the entire focus of what you were trying to say, but it's going to take you time to ramp up. Internships are challenging for this reason. Okay, so I love internships. I had 6 internships during my university, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I would absolutely go back and do that. When people talk about, oh, we don't need college or university, like boot camp's fine or be self-taught, I'm not against that. But for me, I would certainly go back and do an internship program. I wouldn't change that for myself or the world. But it does mean that you're changing every few months. And that means ramp up. It means being uncomfortable. So I think my advice for you, sus boy, is like, this is a good opportunity to practice being comfortable. How do you say that? Practice getting comfortable while being, I don't know. I think you know what I'm trying to say. Comfortable being uncomfortable. Yeah. Good opportunity for that. It's hard to live stream. Words don't work. And then the next part is like, you are going to be expected to be ramping up. I think if you're working somewhere and they have different expectations of you, like you must be an expert by the end of this or something, probably not a great place, but I'm assuming that's not the case for you. So don't beat yourself up. It'll take some time. And I bet you if you have more internships in the future, so maybe you're returning to this place or you have another internship somewhere, or even if this is your only internship, when you start full-time somewhere, I bet you, or the next team change you do, I bet you'll find that like you have some ramp up time still, but you'll probably notice that it's going faster, right? Because over time, there's going to be sets of skills and things that you learn that they just happen to be applicable across the board, right? Different ways you approach solving problems, going to understand things. These are skills that regardless of what tech stack, language, whatever, you're like, hey, this is how I would go approach this. Maybe you get better at networking with people on the team to ask them questions, better at using source control to go look things up. You have more experience asking more directed questions, whatever it is. All these things build up experience over time, and then you can just go use that more effectively in your next scenario. So like I said, it's hard. So don't beat yourself up. Things will get better. And if you're curious about like, hey, like, am I taking too long to ramp up on this stuff? Like, I'm not saying it's impossible to be taking too long or something, but have a conversation. I feel like some of the best advice that I offer to people, even though it sounds very generic and people are probably like, well, that's dumb, I already knew that. People don't do it. Talk to your manager. I am an engineering manager, and I can tell you the number of times where I'm helping people that don't report to me, and they have scenarios or things they want to talk about. And the first thing that I'm thinking is like, man, like, you should really talk to your manager about that. Like, if you were reporting to me, I would love if you came and talked to me about that. I would very much appreciate it. This is one of those things where I think try to practice that early. But I think you're going to do great. You're watching the Dev Leader live stream, so obviously you're set up for success, right? Right? Okay. No, I hope that helps, though. Thanks for the question. I think it's a good one. Cool. I think we're out of questions in the chat. We're a bit after 8. I think my final thoughts for the project stuff, that just to kind of close out this topic, is that like, I don't think that the advice that people are giving online, even though it might look different, like go build an app and get users, or just work on stuff to learn, or just build stuff to show off as like a showcase in your portfolio. I don't think that this advice is mutually exclusive or only one of these things is right or wrong, but I do think that you want to think about what your goals are. If you've gone through a lot of learning and you're like, hey, I need something to showcase. Yeah, just as an example, maybe the calculator app or a weather app, because the weather app in ASP.NET Core comes out of the box. You don't have to do anything. You literally just click through the Visual Studio wizard and you get a weather app. If you're like, hey, that's not going to, I can't show that off because everyone else has that, I would say you're probably right. It doesn't mean that it's a waste of time for you to do it. It's just probably not a good use case for showing off. Okay, so then now you need to ask a more pointed question, like what things should I have on my resume to stand out more? It's a very different question than what project should I go build. Okay, so what should you do to stand out? I still think, depending on who's looking through your stuff, you could still build something that's boring and been done. But I think, and something that would seem cool to me, this is just my perspective, is even if you built something boring, like what if you took a calculator app and then you talked about how you built this thing and it was like a desktop application, and then you refactored the code and you made it a cross-platform mobile app, and then you also re-leveraged part of that and made it into a web service, and then you kept the history in like a database. And now all of a sudden, all these random things that I just blurted out, obviously this is a super weird example, but bear with me. You're able to kind of put together this story about like, yeah, it's a boring app, let's say, but all those things that you had to go learn to do that, like that's a pretty cool like group of things that you could showcase. And if you don't have the work experience, you're literally creating this kind of stuff to be able to talk about. Here is stuff that I'm learning about, I'm interested in, that I have some experience at least using, because that is going to be better than no things. If we haven't talked about this at all, so this is the final thought. If you're not someone who's brand new, so you have worked at places, you might still have this question where you're like, hey, people are talking about I need side projects and stuff. You might not, right? The goal, Jonathan, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Sorry, they caught me off guard. And yeah, I don't want to say thank you so much. My wife watches a lot of court like streaming, and so people will send in tips and stuff. And it's funny because I'm like, I tell her like I stream and stuff, like, and she I don't think she like makes fun of me for it, but she's like, okay, well, this person's streaming and they have like 100,000 people watching the stream. And I'm like, yeah, I got like 100 people watching. So I think it's a bit of a different dynamic. So I think she thinks it's kind of maybe seems a little silly, but she knows I really care about it. But then I joke about those streamers and I'm like, man, it's like nonstop when they have that many people watching. There's like people that are like constantly tipping, and I'm like, these people are making a killing from it. So I just wanted to say thank you so much. The amount or whatever does not, like, that's not, it's just the fact that you kind of went out of your way to do that. Thank you. That means a lot. I forgot what I was saying because I got so caught off guard with that. I think I was saying for people that have work experience, when it's time for projects, I think that how I would look at this is like, if you feel that you've been working somewhere and unable to demonstrate impact, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you so much. If you feel like you've been working somewhere and you've been unable to demonstrate impact, I would say that might be an opportunity where you're like, okay, well, maybe I want to think about other ways to showcase myself on a resume or a job application. But I do think that if you have work experience, I would try to dig into those projects that you have worked on at work and reflect on, like, what was the impact I had? Again, you might want to look at a bit of keyword stuff. Okay, so you worked on this project. What are some easy call outs? Like what language, what tech stack? Call out some of those things. At a bare minimum, it's going to help in situations where there's some automatic filtering for keywords. Cool. But then let's describe the impact. Let's describe what you did. I think another misconception when people are talking about projects on resumes is that, and I understand because I'm very much like this, the person that's trying to recruit you is not interested in hiring your team. And you might say, my team did this, but and you might know in your head what part you did, but you are leaving it very ambiguous for the recruiter to understand what part you did. So don't do that. talk about what you did because it's your resume. I think that when you're having conversations about this kind of stuff, you still want to indicate what things you did, but I don't think you have to like mislead people and be like, oh, my team, they didn't do anything. Like it was all me. Like that's extreme the wrong way. So just try to make sure that you're calling out, you know, your contributions, because that makes it much more obvious and less guessing for someone reviewing your resume. So look for the impact. Ritvik, we're about to wrap up here, so thank you for coming. I am going to answer your question though. So, or it's not really a question, it's a statement. I'm going to respond to it. Looking for software engineering internships, and it literally feels impossible. Okay. I don't know where you're applying to, the types of companies or things like that. Not necessarily that you have to go into detail and list them all. I'm not saying I don't believe you. They do exist. So to give you an example, like I have an intern for Microsoft starting in less than 30 days. So, you know, we're doing it. My previous team, I saw that they had I think they have like 4 interns coming. So that's an option, like, I mean, that exists, right? Made full stack projects, but can't describe impact. I don't know what to do. Okay, so Ritvik, I'm assuming that based on the fact you're talking about internships and describing impact, I'm assuming you just kind of joined the stream. That example for impact was primarily for people that have been in the industry already. And this is actually a really good thing to kind of round out this conversation. As someone, like if I were hiring, except defense and all, since I'm not a US citizen. Okay, it's difficult for me to answer internships on other countries because I don't have experience with it. The only country that I have experience outside of the US, aside from Canada, because I'm from Canada, is Mexico. So like it's really difficult for me to comment just because I don't know the dynamics. I don't know if some companies are saying like we only hire from these countries for internships or something. I just don't know the details of that, so I do apologize on that. But on the impact part, if I were hiring junior people or I were hiring interns, I'm not looking for impact on resumes. And the reason is because you probably have not yet demonstrated that in your career because your career hasn't started. So it's just not something I would look for personally. If I were looking, because this is something I think that some people don't get to, software teams effective software teams would do better, in my opinion, to be composed of a range of skill levels. So you might say, okay, well, if we wanted to make a rock star team, why wouldn't we just go take the most top level engineers in the world and go jam them on a team? They're obviously going to crush it. Yeah, they might build some cool shit. Don't get me wrong. But I think as an engineering manager, when I'm building teams, I want to make sure that I have a mix of levels. And that's because there's different scopes of work that need to get done. There are different opportunities that higher levels can help more junior people with. It works out really well. So the result of that is that at least on every team where there's managers that think roughly like me, there's going to be a need for junior people. There always will be. There always will be. So, so the trick there is that if I'm looking for someone that's junior, I'm not looking for impact. What I'm looking for is that you're interested in learning and that you're like proactive in doing so. Like that's what I would be looking for on a resume. So if you can show me that you've been doing that kind of stuff, like to me, that will stand out. It's not about impact in those situations for that level, just because I don't think that you would have it. That's all. People expect you to do open source and have 100 people use your application just to get an internship. So I think you missed the beginning of the beginning of this. Let me link the code commute. I think you're on YouTube. So I'm not sure if you came from Dev Leader or like if this just kind of if this just showed up and people are like, I think someone was saying last time like, oh, the algorithm just put you in front of me. Let me see. where is this? Oh, I might need to refresh my page here, but I want to send you the link in the chat, and you might be able to just like search for it if you want. Come on. Oh, here it is. It's titled, What Projects for My Developer Job Application? I don't know if this is going to necessarily work in the chat, so I apologize. No, that didn't work at all. Give me one sec here. I'm sorry. But just popped up in your feed. Nice. Okay. Thanks, YouTube algorithm. There is another YouTube channel I have because you're watching my primary dev leader channel. I don't know if you can click that link if it works on YouTube chat, but that is to a video on my other YouTube channel called Code Commute. And that's kind of, that video is what inspired this whole live stream. So I think based on when you said what's up, I think you joined the conversation quite late, which is fine. Next time you'll join early. But in all seriousness, I think that if you have the time, you can watch it on 2x speed or fast forward, whatever you want. Check out that video. That's from my other YouTube channel. I talk about all of the same topics. It's just maybe I'm yelling at traffic or something because it's a vlog entry. So that's what I would recommend. But I would say don't give up. I think it's pretty common where people get frustrated that things aren't going their way, and then we start kind of we start creating more barriers for ourselves, right? So just as an example, sorry, I don't have time for resume feedback, unfortunately. I wish I did. I don't. I get sent it all the time on LinkedIn, and most times people don't even ask. So thank you very much for being polite and asking. Sometimes people just send the resume and say, review this, and like we haven't even exchanged words yet. It's kind of awkward. Don't do that. But I do not have time for that. I'm very sorry. When I've talked about this before, there are certain things that in my own personal time I end up giving them up, and then I realize I'm not being fair to myself. So I end up having to draw the line somewhere, and resume reviews are generally one of those things because they take up time, and then I'm not doing things that I really want to invest time in. So I do apologize for that. But the one thing that I wanted to say about kind of creating barriers for ourselves, and I'm not picking on what you said, I just wanted to use it as an example to highlight it. But the problem is people expect you to do open source and have 100 people use your application just to get an internship. So this might be something that you're feeling. So I don't want you to feel I don't want to make you or like invalidate that feeling for you, because I get that it's frustrating. So please, just trying to acknowledge that. But the rest of your statement is actually not true. So I'm trying to acknowledge that I know it feels that way, but like it's not true, because I hire people and I don't expect people to do open source. And I spent the beginning of this entire live stream saying, I actually don't want you to go build applications to get 100 users. So it's just different perspective, right? And I think that when people get frustrated, you will create this narrative. And it's not just you. I mean, like people, like this is the thing that we do. I'm not a psychologist, but this is a pattern I see because I do it myself too. But we create a narrative where it's like, well, if this isn't working, it's got to be because of all these things. And like, it's just because it's frustrating, right? So I'm trying to tell you this, not to say, hey, Ritvik, I think you're wrong. I'm telling you this because I want you to start looking at it a different way, and I don't want you to give up on it. So, yeah, I think I had an interview with Dell a few months ago, and I know I failed because of my bad behavioral skills. Okay, so Ritvik, what are you going to do about that, right? I think when we have challenges like this, because not like, man, like I don't interview often. I know how interviews work. I literally have a course on interviews, on behavioral interviews in particular. I'm a manager. I've conducted many interviews, but I don't personally interview that often, and it makes me nervous. And even though I understand how they work, I'm like, oh no, I'm nervous. So I'm not, it's not a skill I have. Interviewing is very much a skill. Okay. And behavioral skills, I mean, by definition, are skills too. So it could be, and I don't know this, but it could be you interviewed poorly, even if you had good behavioral skills, or maybe your behavioral skills do need some work. But I don't think that and sorry, the Reddit posts and some companies in the US started selecting people purely based on the fact that open source. There's a lot of stuff that goes on the internet, like with like the GitHub commit graphs. It's a meme at this point. I'm stand by this. If a company's hiring you based on your GitHub commit graph, like tell them to eat it, man. Like that's a bullcrap metric. Absolutely bullcrap. It's so ridiculous. And sorry, if you are someone in a situation where this is a belief that you have because you've been told this, like I'm not blaming you for thinking that way. I'm just saying it's a bullcrap metric because you can literally write scripts that just simulate the commit graph. It tells you nothing. So if you're saying, oh man, like these places won't hire me because of that, you don't want to work there. I'll tell you don't want to work there, because they don't actually know what they're talking about. So don't stress about that. Please don't. But on your behavioral skills, maybe it's something that you want to pay more attention to. So don't look at the job rejection as like as a barrier, like, oh, it's never going to work now, or that you're, I don't know, that you're defeated by it. But like, it's feedback, right? It might not be feedback you wanted, but it's feedback. So what can you do with that, and how can you improve for next time? Obviously, you don't have to answer that in the chat. I'm just trying to get you to think about it for next time. So, okay. I am going to wrap this up, though. So I'm going to jump over and do the thing that I got to do, which is advertise things. So most of my live streams... oh, and they gave one last question. Let me go back. I'll answer one last question. If you can just tell what I can work on as a full stack app. I have a job fair in my university in February, and I want to have another project. Okay, I have videos and articles on how to approach this. I don't know your situation, and I can't tell you the right thing. But here's what I would tell you, because I like talking about frameworks and thought processes for things, and that way that you can make decisions for yourself, because in my opinion, there's no better way than teaching you the frameworks, then you can apply them and make them your own, versus me just telling you things, because I'm just some dude on the internet that popped up in your YouTube feed. Don't forget that, right? You don't know who I am. I could be just making up stuff. I don't think I am. But so what full stack app to go build? What I would say, and this is if you now that I'm in your YouTube feed, go look through my live streams, and you will find topics on this. The approach that I recommend people take, and this is my personal opinion on this stuff, is I recommend you think about the hobbies you have. It could be anything. Could be you love movies, you love certain types of music, you love different sports, you love cars, you love a certain brand, whatever. Comic books, anything. Video games. Pick some hobby you have, or pick a couple hobbies to get like a couple of ideas going. So pick a few hobbies. And then what I would do is I would say your goal, and your goal can change here, but if your goal, you want to be able to demonstrate this at a job fair to be able to show off, I think I would pick something that you're comfortable with, and that way you can make progress on it. And if you had to pick a couple things, so I know you said you do MERN and .NET. Awesome. Okay. So I would recommend like leverage.net for this, and pick a couple hobbies that you have. And then maybe you have to pick a technology that's a little bit new to you. And I'm just making this up. You don't have to, this is just my framework for this. When you pick everything that's new, you're going to go very slow, because every single step you're like, I don't know how this works, and you get stuck, and that's cool, you learn. If you pick a bunch of stuff, if it's everything you know, then you're not learning a ton. It's good practice, but you're not learning a ton because you already know it. But if you pick a bunch of stuff you already know and like one thing that's kind of new, then you can get some good momentum, and then kind of like pick up on this new thing, get stuck a little bit on that, and make progress. So perhaps, I'm just going to make this up, perhaps you haven't used Postgres before, and you're like, it's time. I'm going to try learning Postgres. I would say, cool, pick .NET, pick Postgres. If you don't want to do that, pick a database you're comfortable with, or pick all the technology you're comfortable with if you're on a time crunch, and then pick a hobby that you have, and then make an app that's related to that. And it doesn't have to be something where you're going to have users paying you money for it. The one that I always go back to, because I think it's a cool one, maybe not for everyone, but I always say, go make a Pokedex. I think that would be sweet. You can use a database, you can use back-end technology, you can use front-end technology. You could change the database. There's so much you can do by building a Pokedex. I think that's a great app to go build. It doesn't have to be a Pokedex, though. Why don't you go make something that's about a database for fictional characters from, favorite movie series, right? Their characters' biography. Like there's so many things that you could do. The reason I recommend that you pick a hobby of yours, and I stand behind this, and I'll explain it, but I think pick a hobby, because when you get stuck, or when you're like, I don't really have a lot of motivation, the idea of picking something that's related to a hobby is that unless you have hobbies where you're just like, kind of like, hey, I'm not going to do that for 10 years, it's not really a hobby, I guess. When you have a hobby, it's interesting to you. So even when you're stuck on stuff, it can kind of give you that little bit of boost where you're like, oh yeah, but this is pretty cool. So for me, and the reason I stand by this, is earlier in the stream, let me scroll back up in the chat. Brax the Saint said in the chat, what is your favorite project? I gave two. One was a professional one, and the other one was a video game that I will never release because it will never be done. But it has always kept me going back because I love role-playing games. And I think it's a super cool, fun thing to go build. And that means I will always have something that's going to keep me interested, no matter how big the challenge is, or if I have to go spend a month refactoring code because it's absolute garbage at this point. But that's what I would recommend, right? It gets me going back to it. Speed cubing, cool. I don't know anything about speed cubing. Could you come up with an application that explains to people the patterns for how they can do it? Could you simulate that somehow? That might be way too complicated. I don't know. Fighting games. Okay, so fighting games, the only one that comes to mind, well, two, like Tekken, Mortal Kombat. Could you have even a database or something with the characters? And you could talk about the move sets. Maybe you could do the characters over time in the different video game series, and if their move sets have changed. There's like fatalities, animalities. You got all this stuff going on. You could do a ton of stuff. But like, is anyone going to pay for that? Probably not. But like, that doesn't matter. That's why I'm saying it does not matter. Go build it. It's cool. So I hope that helps, Vic. Okay, last thing I'm going to do. This time I did not go to my newsletter for the topic. The topic came from Code Commute, but if you're interested, most weeks on this live stream that is at 7 p.m. Pacific every Monday, generally the topic comes from my newsletter. This time you can see that there's a dumb picture of my face there. I was just going through my 2025 goals, and in that newsletter, there's actually like a 40-minute video where I'm just talking about like a reflection and what's coming up for this year. So this time was a little different, but if you're like, hey, this is kind of cool, I'd be interested in tuning in next week. I wonder what the topic is. Next Saturday, the newsletter goes out. You do not have to subscribe to the newsletter. I say this on almost every episode of Code Commute now, but if you're like, sounds dumb, I don't like newsletters, that's cool. Don't subscribe to it, but if you just want to see the topic, you can check out what's going to be released. You can read it Saturday, Sunday, and all of Monday, and then check it out on the live stream. So that's one. I've mentioned Code Commute a few times here. This is my second YouTube channel. Just past the 1,000 subscriber mark, I think tomorrow, perhaps, maybe at least by the end of the week, this channel, Code Commute, will be monetized, which is super cool because it's been way faster than my main channel. It's actually doing way better than my main channel. So Code Commute is very much like a stream of consciousness, almost always in the car while I'm driving. There's been a couple of episodes, especially over the break for the holidays, where I wasn't driving much, and I wanted to get some Code Commute episodes in. So you can check out this channel. I will put a link to it in the chat. It's really cool. There's been people from Code Commute that are coming over to the live stream. I'm trying to think. I want to scroll back up in the chat. I know Architect, who's up in the chat a little bit earlier, comes from Code Commute. I'm pretty sure, because I'm pretty sure Architect was commenting on Code Commute videos. But cool to see people coming from this channel. So thank you so much for that. Dev Leader is my main YouTube channel. So this one, I'm just celebrating going over 9,000 subscribers. I'm assuming most people that are on this stream probably know my main channel or came from there. So if not, Dev Leader is my main channel where I have edited videos. So there's a podcast on here. All of my programming content is on C# and .NET, but I also have topics. Oh, it says my chat is broken. Bring back the chat. But I do have topics on Dev Leader that are very much like software engineering in general. So, for example, this video here is like about becoming an engineering manager and if that's a good fit for people. So, not C# or .NET, still relevant for software developers. So that's that. And then the final thing that I will mention is that I do have courses on Dome Train. They're in two flavors, one of which is going to be around career development. So we were talking about behavioral interview questions, right? So you can see nailing the behavioral interview. It's a course I have with Ryan Murphy on Dome Train. I have the rest are C# based, so Reflection and .NET, Getting Started and Deep Dive. These are two courses. There's actually a bundle for sale on Dome Train where these two are discounted if you get them together. And then there's a refactoring course as well. This year, I talked about this in my newsletter, but this year my plan is that I'm going to do a couple more courses that are career focused throughout the year. And then the technical courses that I'm going to make are going to be, I'm just realizing someone said on Instagram, is all software developer are bald? Come on, man. Come on, man. I almost got hair. The answer is yes, we're all bald. But the other courses that are technical that I'm going to be making are going to be sort of in the Let's Build It series. So that will be taking you from creating an application, from gathering requirements, all the way through building it, refining it, testing it, and deploying it, which is going to be cool. Those courses, so let me back up. The career ones, the short ones are like 3 hours long. The long ones are 5 to 6 hours long. The C# ones I have are 5 to 6 hours long. The Let's Build It ones are going to be like 15 hours long. So those are going to be super meaty courses. It's going to be a ton of work, but I'm excited for it. So I think that's all. And maybe one final plug, because we talked about this a little bit earlier. Let me go back to Brand Ghost. So Brand Ghost is the SaaS that I am building on the side. This is the reason I stopped writing blog articles, because I'm spending more time coding stuff. But it's totally free for people to use to cross-post across their social media platforms. So I know there's a lot of people that are on Twitter that are watching this right now compared to other platforms. If you're on Twitter and you see my tweets, every tweet that you see that's not a reply, actually, even the replies now, because that's a new feature, every tweet you see from me comes from Brand Ghost. So Brand Ghost allows me to schedule content. It allows me to cross-post it. And the paid-for features that are more advanced, it's not for every content creator, but it allows me to sort of have recurring content. That way, I never have to think about scheduling a post ever again in my life. I can just create content and it will go out at the right cadence. If that ever runs out, so for example, I have 6 months worth of memes. If I took another 6 months off and I never added another meme, it would recycle all 6 months worth of memes automatically. So for me, it allows a lot more flexibility. I can focus on content creation, and then I can focus on building things like Brand Ghost itself. So if you're interested, you're just getting started in content creation, Like I said, it's totally free. It's not even a trial to use the cross-posting stuff. You can literally just have a free account and we'll cross-post to your social media platforms for you. No strings attached. The reason we do that is because we want to make sure that we have such a good platform that as you're building up your experience as a creator, that you say, hell yeah, I want to keep using Brand Ghost for this stuff. I want the more advanced features because they're going to help me. And I am that convinced that we can do a good job, that we're giving away all of the cross-posting stuff for free. So that's the last thing I have to offer in terms of sales pitches and all that. So thank you so much for watching. Remember, next week, 7 p.m. Pacific, be here, don't be late.